Hello everyone, my name is Jordan and today I'm going to be doing my August wrap-up. August was a pretty good month, pretty unusual. I listened to a lot of audiobooks. That was like my main form of consumption this month, but I did read one physical book and also one ebook. So yeah, so I only have two physical copies to hold up for you. In one of those physical copies, I didn't even read the physical copy, but whatever, it doesn't really matter. So the first book is Captain's Fury by Jim Butcher. This is the fourth book in the Codex Alera series. I've been talking about this series a lot. I think I've been talking about almost one book a month so far because I've just been picking them up one after the other, but I think I'm going to take a break from this series in September. I don't think I'm going to get to the fifth one this month. But that's okay because my goal is to finish this series before the end of the year, and there's 6 books. I just finished the fourth, so I have plenty of time to read the last 2 books. This is an adult fantasy series. We have elemental magic where people can fury craft, which is basically, or furies are sort of these elemental creatures that they sort of like, people can control and make do things for them, so that's kind of where the elemental part comes from. It comes from these furies that people can control, but our main character, Tavi, cannot control furies. It's something he struggles with, but it's also one of his strengths. It makes him look at the world in a completely different way from others, whereas the entire world relies on their furies for a lot of different things, and he doesn't have them, so it kind of gives him a disadvantage, but it also makes him have to think a little more strategically, I guess, and it kind of makes him stronger in that way. We also follow multiple other characters throughout this series, and it's just, I absolutely love it. This is, like, for me, my definition of, like, a cozy fantasy. I mean, like, lots of dark things happen in it, but it just makes me feel good. Tavi is such a fantastic character to follow, too, because in the very first book, he's only, like, 16 years old, and now in this book, I don't know exactly how old he is. He's gotta be in his early 20s, but several years go by between, like, each book, so Tavi really grows, and watching him grow up and turn into the person he's supposed to be is just amazing. And even all the other characters, there's tons of, like, strong female characters in this series as well, and there's just a lot going on. Some of it might be a little standard fantasy tropes, but I don't care. I love it anyways. Fun, awesome series. Now, this fourth book I think is my least favorite in the series, just because a huge chunk of it, like, we follow characters that I like, but it's just I didn't really care for what they were doing in this book. Like, they were basically the whole book. Some of our characters are literally just trying to get from point A to point B, and then you're, like, following, all of the things that they go through on this journey, but it just wasn't really relevant. I felt it didn't really, like, add anything to the story. So I did end up giving this one 4 stars. I still very much enjoyed it. Like I said, I love all the characters. I love this world. So even though what they were doing wasn't exactly the most exciting thing in the world, there's still characters that I love, and I still really enjoyed this book. So yeah, that's this one. Then I also ended up picking up 2 more Jim Butcher books, but in a different series, and I listened to them both on audiobook. And that is the Stormfront and Fool's Moon. These are the first 2 books in the Harry Dresden series. It's a adult urban fantasy series where we follow Harry Dresden. He is a wizard detective. I think it. Ooh, does it take place in Chicago? I think it takes place in it's some big city, but and it's a fun time. It's a really it's a great series to listen to the audiobook because I think I want to say it's James Marston is the narrator, and he makes Harry Dresden. Like, he gives him so much personality. I honestly cannot imagine reading the physical book over the audiobook after listening to the audiobook, because he just is Harry Dresden. Like, I just feel like he gives him so much personality, and I love listening to these audiobooks, so I'm definitely going to continue the rest of the series in audiobook format, because like I said, I cannot imagine doing it any other way. But yeah, so it's a fun series. I have started this series in the past, so these 2 books were rereads. I think I only read, like, the first 3, so I did start the series over. It's fun series, like, it's perfect for fall, because there's, like, magic. Like I said, he's a wizard. you know, you follow, like, each book kind of follows a different case, and it all deals with like supernatural creatures, other wizards, werewolves, vampires, yeah. So it's kind of your standard supernatural stuff, but it's really fun, and I did really enjoy the first two books. I gave both Stormfront and Fool's Moon 4 stars. Highly recommend the series, and I hear that I think the series just gets better and better, so really excited to continue on with that. Then the next book I read was Four Dead Queens by Astrid Scholt. I'm not sure if that's how you say her name. This was the third audiobook I listened to, and this was a pleasant surprise. This is like a YA fantasy sci-fi mix, almost more sci-fi. I mean, we have this, like, you know, made up kingdom, or not made up, but you know, it's fiction, so it's made up. But we've all this kingdom called Quadaria, which is basically made up of like four cities almost, but they're each ruled by a queen. But the four queens rule together in like this central location. So even though they're like separate areas or separate cities, and they each have their own queen, but the queens rule together, it's kind of a weird dynamic, very different. And I guess this all started, I guess one king used to rule Quadaria, and he ended up like getting a wife from one of the four major surrounding cities or whatever, but then he died. So his four wives kind of like created this whole new like kingdom or quadrant thing where they each rule their own thing, and it's been a queendom basically ever since, but with four queens. I don't know, I feel like I'm explaining it horribly, but each quadrant are very different from one another, like just like the type of people, the lifestyle, the way they live. You know, we have like sort of the agricultural district, and they're very primitive. They don't use technology or anything, because they don't want to like overproduce or like ruin their fields by like, I don't know, whatever. But then we also have another kingdom that is very like technology orientated, and they have some like crazy like sci-fi tech, so that's where like a lot of the sci-fi comes in. Then we have quadrants that our main focus is more like entertainment and pleasure, enjoyment, that sort of thing. And I don't even remember what the fourth quadrant's like main thing is. I think they're just kind of like an average quadrant. I don't know. They just live their lives, I guess. I don't remember. But so we follow the perspective of the four queens. We kind of jump around between their perspectives. And going into this book, so we're even told right away in the synopsis, and you can even kind of tell from the title, that all four queens are like murdered, like one right after the other, and this is sort of like a murder mystery on who killed the queens. So we're kind of following, like I said, the four queens' different perspectives leading up to their deaths. But then we're also following the perspective of Carolee, who is a thief, and she ends up finding out about the deaths of the queens, and there are people who are after her, and she's trying to kind of get this information to the palace because it's not known, like there's nothing on the news, like no one seems to know that the queens are murdered, but Carolee has found out, and she also has the help of Varen, Varen is from Ionia, which is that's like the technology rich quadrant. But that quadrant, one of the things about Eonists, they're called, or that's what people from Ionia are called, is Eonist. So Varen is an Eonist, and Eonists have like, they show no emotion. They're kind of grown up expecting to, you know, really clamp down on their emotions because emotions get in the way, and they're supposed to be like very like intellectual, technology oriented people. So these two, both Carolee and Varen, kind of their lives clash, and they end up both kind of on this journey to get to the palace and tell people like, hey, someone killed the queens. They have like some information about it, but then there are other people trying to stop them. And so there is like this little bit of this weird relationship between Varen and Carolee, because they're on this weird journey, and we're kind of discovering like Varen, like who Varen is, and like you're kind of getting these little snippets about Varen that kind of make you think that there's more to him than the standard Aeonist. He says things like, "Oh, that's so beautiful," and that's just not something an Aeonist would say. And so that was like really interesting. I loved learning about the queens, and so this was just like a really pleasant surprise for me. I don't know, I was not expecting this. In fact, I thought I was gonna unhaul this book. And then I just randomly saw the audiobook go on sale for like a couple bucks, and I'm like, why not? And I decided to pick it up and start listening to it, and I ended up really enjoying it, so I'm so glad I did, because this was like an awesome, like very different YA series, or not series, it's a standalone. But it was so much fun, it was so different from any other YA book I've ever read before, so I'm really glad that I ended up listening to this, because it was a really good, really refreshing take in the YA world. So yeah, I highly recommend this one. Check this one out. It's not like super popular. Like, I remember when this book came out, it did get quite a bit of buzz, but then I felt like I never actually heard anyone like review it. So it was sort of like one that got some hype when it first came out, but then it's like it just didn't stick. So I feel like a lot of people didn't actually end up reading it. But I highly recommend it. I did give this one 4 stars. Really fun YA book. And then the last book that I read in August was A Duel with a Vampire by Elise Kova. This is part of her Married to Magic series. It's not really a series, but it kind of follows like a romance in the same world, but they're all like completely separate. You don't have to read them in any particular order. And yeah, this one takes place, or we follow, oh my god, I can't even remember the main character's name. But our main character is she's a blacksmith, actually. She lives in Hunter's Hamlet, which is this town right on the edge of this place called the Fade. And the Fade is sort of like this misty border between where the humans live and where non-humans live, like the Fae and the vampires and just all other things magical. But obviously this book we're focusing on vampires. So every night, vampires, these like kind of zombie-like, mindless vampires come out of this mist or this fade. And so Hunter's Hamlet is sort of like this town right on the edge that is just kind of like the first line of defense, trying to prevent vampires from getting like out to the rest of the world. So it's very much like everyone's pretty much a hunter. Everyone has a very specific role. Our main character is the blacksmith. In fact, it's sort of something that's passed down from her family through like the women. Where the men generally end up becoming hunters, the women are actually the blacksmith, at least in this family, not necessarily every family. So anyways, our main character is a blacksmith, and this takes place like right before the blood moon, which I'm not sure if that happens every month? I don't know. But the blood moon is basically this night where the fade is at its like weakest or thinnest, and the vampire lord himself comes out of the fade with his army, and it's one of the worst nights that they can have. And so during this blood moon, the vampire lord takes our main character with him into the vampire lands, I guess. And that is where we kind of discover that there's been a curse put on the vampires, and we're starting to kind of question who the bad guys really are. Is it the vampires or is it the humans? Because the vampires believe that the humans put this curse on them. The humans think that vampires are just this evil species out to get them, that there's some like mindless creature out for blood. And so the vampire lord actually took our main character specifically to help break this curse. She's obviously very skeptical about it, trying to kill him constantly. It's sort of a enemies to lovers romance, but the romance itself I thought was just okay. What I thought was really good about this book was actually learning about the history of the vampires and the hunters and how it all started. Like, that to me was fascinating, because there is sort of this mystery in the backdrop on like who laid this curse, how do we break it. And that to me I felt like was the strong point in this book, was just like I said, the history of the vampires, the history of the first hunters of Hunter's Hamlet, and just the start of all that. Like, that to me was very cool. Like I said, the romance was just okay. And on average, I thought, or for the most part, I just thought this was an average read. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I've read several of Elise Kova's books over the years. they're never like the best books I read, but I still continue to like come back to them and pick them up because they're just fun, easy, lighthearted reads, have a touch of romance in them, and yeah. So yeah, those are the 5 books. Did I get them all? Yeah, 5 books. I did start. I was like in the middle of 2 other books, but I'll save those for next month since I didn't finish them until early September. But so yeah, those are the 5 books I read this month. It was a decent month, and I'm so excited for September. I have so many books I want to read, and I just put out my fall TBR like a week ago, so go check that out because I'm so excited. I'm thinking about doing a vlog this weekend, a nice cozy fall vlog. I don't know what I'm going to read yet, but I'm excited, and I don't know what it is about fall that makes me want to do vlogs. Like, I think I've only done 1 vlog on my channel, and that was like last year when I first started my channel. So I don't know. Look forward to that. And I will see you guys next time with another good video. Let me know what you guys have been reading, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.